the Ukrainian generals are asking for permission to use long-range missiles to attack bases in Russia. This is a story from about 2.5 years ago, and they finally got approval. It only took one election loss to achieve that. Welcome to the reality show. Joining me today is Marco and Richard. Today we'll be talking about something I wanted to talk about for about 2 days or so, and every day sort of a new story came out. In both aspects, we also have much. This was supposed to be the daily objective topic about the approvals themselves, and since then, the things escalated, as people like to say. I always like to follow Alex Jones on X, and he's pretty much calling for World War III like every single day. But now some other people have also caught on and are, you know, either criticizing Biden for provoking World War III or are themselves sort of calling that something like that might happen. So we will be talking about that. As I've said, the first story is the first story was that Biden has approved that Ukraine can use long-range missiles to launch them into Russian territory. So, actually hit the bases where the attacks are coming from, specifically the missile attacks are coming from. Then I think the day after, or maybe later the day, they also approved anti-personnel mines to be used within Ukraine. If you haven't followed the Russia-Ukraine conflict for in some time, basically Russia has been slowly advancing into Ukraine for I believe about a year now, and by that I mean like really slowly, but they are advancing, and from time to time they do make a breakthrough. So basically, being able to use these mines can help with stopping the advance, at least at the very least slowing it down. Uh, Marco, what are your thoughts?
Well, my reaction is that Biden actually caused this war when he refused to intervene when during the months while Putin was piling up troops and equipment on the border of Ukraine. For about a month, we used to receive reports from the US intelligence saying, "Oh, Putin is about to attack in 15 days' time, in 14 days' time. Oh, he's going to attack on Tuesday." So they kept an eye on it. They knew exactly what he was doing. They knew exactly they was going to attack, but no one did anything. The US didn't lead anyone. Didn't even ask Europe, "Oi, guys, pull a finger out. Putin is about to do something stupid." No, no. But now that, as you mentioned, he's lost the election. Well, he didn't even fight it. He's lucky as lost the election. Um, is going to try and cause as much problems, as many problems as he can for the next administration. Um, let's put it this way: there's no intention from the current administration to help Ukraine as such. At the same time, I doubt there's intention of causing any escalation or any significant um, expansion of the war from Russia into Europe. But on the other hand, the West itself, by allowing already in 2014 Putin to get away with the first invasion of Ukraine, when he's still holding Crimea and other areas close to the border with Ukraine, we did very little at the time. We allowed him for another 7, 8 years, 6, 7 years to effectively entrench his position in Ukraine and gaslight us at the same time, sometimes literally by providing gas to the EU. The EU has been playing second fiddle to Putin effectively throughout this time. In 2021, they were importing 40% of the gas from Russia. In 2022, the amount has gone down to 29%. And today is still 18% of the gas that the EU imports is from Russia. And we know that there are dodgy trading going on, for example, with Kazakhstan. France is supplying avionics to Kazakhstan, who's then passing on them to Russia. Russian planes use French avionics from Thales and other companies, and they need to be replaced, they need to be maintained, and they need French parts. This is a very specific industry that can only be stuff that can only be produced by the people who produce them, because it's such a unique set of equipment, and they can only come via France. So really, we are the West, the EU, is still supplying money to Putin, at the same time screaming blue murder every time Putin behaves like an idiot. I mean, he's a dictator, so we expect that from him. But this kind of behavior from the West is just deplorable.
Uh, for my part, I wanted to comment on what you were saying about World War III at the beginning. Now, leaving people like Alex Jones to one side, which is good policy any day of the week, you could focus on people like the Iron General, he's known as, the former military chief in Ukraine, who's now the Ukrainian envoy to the UK, because he was talking about the fact that World War III has already begun. His argument being that because North Korea and Iran and he also mentioned China are so prevalent in the weaponry and with the North Korean soldiers, their actual presence on the battlefield, that it's spread beyond a conflict between just two countries. And of course, now that the UK with their Shadow Storm missiles and the US with their long-range missiles being now used in Ukraine against Russia, that is also extending the amount of countries directly involved, at least in terms of their arsenal being used. And of course, you can look at the fact that Iran has been supplying all these drones, these Shahed drones, for about 8,000 of them, I think, across the conflict, and those, which also cause enormous destruction. Those are the ones that cause real shock waves when they hit, when the sort of cloud of fuel around ignites as they land, causing, with the heat and pressure, a really big shock wave, which causes a massive amount of damage. And of course, those are being used and funneled by Iran, and they've also been supplying the technology to Russia from Iran to how to build those. So all of this has made it, a coalition. An axis of evil is the phrase trotted out all the time in different contexts. But there's cooperation between all these evil dictators, as we were saying, and it is well, it's spreading, isn't it? Really, is it World War III? Is that hyperbole? You can't actually trace back the start of these things till later on, and by then we might all be dead. Hopefully not. And I think it probably is at the moment an exaggeration, given how prone Russia in particular is to saber rattling, threatening nuclear response, changing thresholds for things, and that kind of stuff. All of the threats that Russia keeps ramping up, and all of those are just ways of shaking the cage at the moment, and the extent to which you report them or cover them or state them as fact or repeat them, you're kind of working for Russia as you're doing now. Particularly since you've got to take it as the evidence of what you've actually seen happen at the moment on the battlefield, on the ground itself. So obviously this period, in this lame duck period, and of course at the moment when Biden can do his best to either stitch up Trump or possibly do things which he can't do so readily in a normal presidency, he can get a few things read and underway. Whichever way you see that, this is a unique period, isn't it, between now and the 20th of January, and therefore we've only got a short window in which we're going to find out where this is going to get to before we then know the new phase from then onwards, which is going to determine, the rest of this conflict.
We'll definitely talk more about the sort of what is basically called Russia revising the nuclear doctrine, or the way they view the use of nukes when it comes to specifically the World War III sort of people talking about that. I think when it is usually being talked about, it's specifically meaning when nukes start dropping, that sort of where the sort of conventional wisdom says, now we are in this like different conflict. But I haven't really thought about it, but the idea of already being in World War III, I think is definitely appealing. I mean, just look at you've mentioned the new axis of evil, sort of Russia, Iran, China, North Korea, and any other ones you wanna connected with. You already have America is in either direct or indirect conflict with pretty much each of them, or will be at some point. I mean, something to always remember is China wants to invade Taiwan, and although I want to bring that up later, I sort of just quickly I want to go back um, to this support for Ukraine, and basically, yeah, the idea that this like something like that, like basically allowing to strike with long range missiles, because Ukraine has been striking in some cases within Russia for some time, especially with drone attacks. But using specifically long range missiles is much different. And basically, I want to just talk a little bit about this, like real, almost like split personality of the West, or I don't know what to exactly call it, but this sort of uh, fence-sitting way of supporting, I mean, not only Ukraine, but also Israel. Basically, we'll give you enough so you don't fall, but we won't actually, we either won't give you the moral support to actually do what is necessary to defend your nation completely, or we won't help you with the material support. We'll only sort of like leave you on life support, basically, so you don't completely fall. And it really, to me, it really speaks of like a complete unseriousness of the West, of not looking at what Russia, Iran, China, or North Korea have been doing, and sort of viewing it as, it's let's just, maybe it won't be a big problem. Let's just try to contain it. This sort of what I really view as a complete appeasement of evil. I'll kick it to you, Marco, in just a second. Something I think, as you've Richard said, we are living in sort of like an interesting time, especially with like so many sort of conflicts that America is directly supporting going on. Israel, Ukraine. That there is a new president coming. We already have a president elect. He will be in office in just a few months. Yet you have a sitting president sort of like trying to do something right now, and sort of the way the world views it, because in some way, sort of something that Biden does almost doesn't matter if it comes from executive order, because you could look at it, well, as soon as Trump comes in, he can take it away. It's not a big deal. Yeah, there are certain things that once you do, it's sort of, even when the new president comes in, you can't really take them back. But yeah, Marco.
Yeah, well, if this is World War III, it's not good news, because the West, we know, doesn't fight wars, hasn't fought a war in order to win for a long time. So if we're in the middle of it, well, we can just go home now, really. And the way, yeah, you're right. The half-assed way in which the West is supporting Ukraine is just fairly pathetic, as I mentioned earlier on. With one hand, they give them, a few crumbs, and with the other, they deal with the guy who's been invading them. So the whole thing is just plain farcical. We still go down this cretinous policies of zero emissions and all this kind of stuff when we could be energy independent. Germany has got massive amount of coal which are not allowed to use because, well, they're using it, but under the environmental doctrine, they're not supposed to use it. We have lots of coal, we have gas in it, but we're not using it. And with the kind of circles we have in number 10, and the chief clown Starmer, which supports an arrest warrant for the prime minister of the only democratic state in the Middle East, and at the same time says that he's against Putin. Well, how can you have in your mind, how can you hold this kind of contradiction? One guy is good, the other one is bad. This is my friend, that's my enemy. The kind of thinking is just a concrete bound way of seeing events. It's just, it decides Ukraine has to be helped, Israel not so much. And even though they are in the same boat, they've both been attacked. So you would expect that some sort of principle is applied and they're treated the same, but no. The way we do things is piecemeal. We deal with a crisis at a time. And as you mentioned, we don't even deal with the causes, but we try and put plasters on the wounds. And what we end up doing is appeasing dictators all over the place. I mean, North Korea is receiving oil from Russia. Today there was some intelligence that proves that, and that's in breach of the UN. There are UN sanctions that stops the supply to 500 million barrels for North Korea. And looking at the evidence, looks like Russia has already provided over 1 million barrels. So, if the UN weren't a big, pointless anti-Semitic bureaucracy that it is, they probably will look at doing something about it, given that it's their own sanction that have been breached by the Russians. So, yeah, if this is a World War III, well, we're not going to win, are we?
When you're talking about the ability to fight in World War III, I mean, I saw some interviews earlier with the Deputy Chief of the British Defence Staff, who was talking about, yes, the British Army is ready to fight tonight if necessary, and using words like that. But he was the same guy who admitted back in May that the British Army had enough ammo ammo and equipment to last about 2 months against Russia. So yeah, we may be ready to fight in that sense, and even that is arguably questionable. But for how long and to what extent? And this is under the government of Starmer, who at the same time that he's giving Storm Shadow weapons to Ukraine, which is a good thing, he's also cutting by £500 million the UK defence spend, and not allowing the UK defence industry and the armed forces in the UK to plan ahead, because all of that kind of spending happens multi-year, needs significant planning in order to be proper. You can't just up the budget, lower the budget, and expect it to resolve itself, by popping down the shops. So it has long-term impacts. And when you hear Starmer's talk, I mean, the guy is such a wet lettuce. He couldn't even scare his own cat, could he? So when he comes to giving, opinions against what Putin is saying, it sounds less than Churchillian, to say the least. Starmer's described Putin as talking irresponsible rhetoric. That's a quote from Starmer there. That's going to go down in the annals of history, isn't it? But he's also made the crucial point that Russia is the aggressor. So he's on top of everything. But yeah, I mean, on the good side, they have given these storm shadows, and that was fired the other day for the first time. And a couple of facts about those. Those cost £2 million each, 17 foot long, and they fly at 600 odd miles per hour. So that's a good sign. But that follows on from what Biden allowed the Ukraine to do. So Starmer was safely in the shadow of Biden when making that decision. So once again, not exactly putting his foot forward.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to sort of support for Ukraine, and as you mentioned, we knew about I mean, not even about the invasion. I mean, the war started in 2014. It's not like, after it, there was nothing. There was still going on. There was still ongoing conflict in the Donbas. It was just sort of brought up as like a full-scale invasion. And I mean, maybe some of you don't remember, but Europe was very slow to like do anything when it came to the support of Ukraine. It was sort of, I think, under some okayish leadership of Biden that sort of this support came for Ukraine. And now, I think if you compare the support from the United States and Europe, I think they are about equal. But once one goes away, as you mentioned, sort of Europe just is being just dragged along by America. And once that goes away, will EU or will Europe basically be able to stand for itself and actually, support like an actual neighbor? Like, again, Ukraine is not some faraway land we know nothing about. It's on our border. It's with me specifically, it's literally on my border. I mean, this is when during the most recent attack, Russia, or not the most recent, but one of the recent attacks Russia did on pretty much all of Ukraine, trying to put them in much worse situation in this upcoming winter. That those missiles struck not that far away from the Polish, from the Romanian, from the Slovak border. I mean, this is happening here, and this sort of, we might do something, we might help them, is, I think, really like scary. This like, I mean, just imagine, just imagine during World War II, if when the Soviet Union, Germany, and unfortunately Slovakia invaded Poland, if your reaction would be, well, it's just happening there, they won't come after us or something like that. I mean, that would be ridiculous. Yet, in some cases, it is happening right now. So sort of, oh, do you want to say anything on that, or I want to go to the nuclear doctrine?
Yeah, fine.
Okay. So something that basically was in the news recently and is one of the sort of igniters of this World War III accusations, or sort of ideas, is that Putin has like officially revised the nuclear doctrine, basically putting it as under Putin's revised nuclear doctrine, a conventional attack on Russia by any nation supported by a nuclear power will be considered a joint attack on his country. Basically, to put it into words, if Ukraine uses these long-range missiles against Russia, which, as you mentioned, those are from the UK and from America, it will be considered as attack by UK and by America. So that's why, people are sort of worried. But I think I think it's really important to remember that one, there is no way you can sort of stand up to evil by basically defaulting, by saying, well, they've said they will escalate it, so now we're not gonna do anything. And I think an important point to remember is Putin is becoming sort of Obama, like putting these red lines that he doesn't actually stand by. There was a worry in the past. Basically, the original nuclear doctrine was basically if Russian sort of land sovereignty is endangered, they will not hesitate to basically use nuclear weapons, which meant one thing that we were not. It would definitely mean that if, for example, the Kursk region that was invaded was attacked, that, Russia might use nuclear weapons to defend it. There was a sort of worry. And a different aspect was what about Crimea and Donetsk and Luhansk? Russia sort of consider it their own land, although they recognize the independence of Donetsk and Luhansk, but they definitely consider Crimea officially their land. And what would happen if Ukraine did actually invade Crimea? But they invaded Kursk and nothing happened. Russia didn't do anything about it. Marco?
Yeah, you're right. But then again, Putin is a weak man. He's a dictator of a former power. We've seen the kind of bad performance that the mighty Red Army has done in invading Ukraine. I mean, we were left made to believe that the Russian army was this frightful machine that, you know, irresistible. If they decide to do something, you know, they're unstoppable. And here they are, faltering against the resistance of the Ukrainian people, who are largely conscript, largely people who volunteer to fight. They are not exactly a war machine, Ukraine, are they? They barely came out of the rubble of the USSR. So and now they are able to stand up to the big paper bear. And Putin doesn't like this. Putin is somebody who loves, you know, loves to get admiration from other people, loves to get prestige from that's why he keeps being seen with the Orthodox priest, just because he likes his power to be acknowledged. And what he's doing with the West, effectively, by shouting loudly, is trying to frighten us into doing the job he's unable to do, into coward ourselves into a position where we appease and we let him do what he wants. And okay, you can keep whatever you want. We're not going to fight you back. But you know, if you were to go and use a nuke somewhere, it might well find that, you know, our response will be there somewhere. I don't expect us to respond in kind with a nuclear weapon, but there are still very big, powerful conventional weapons that could actually harm Russia. And let's face it, Russia is hardly an economic power now. They're on their knees. They're forced to swap a bit of oil with the North Korean in exchange for troops that cannot be used in the full context as much as the Russian troops, because first of all, they don't speak Russian. So they can't replace, when a soldier is hit or removed, you cannot replace one-to-one with a Korean. So already, you know, this kind of ridiculous deal is limiting the capacity of the Russian machine to attack. But, you know, they don't really need to be that efficient, because we're gonna do his job. We're gonna let him get away with it. When actually now would be the time to strike Russia, strike Iran, strike the Houthis, the Hamas, and you know, and at the same time send a good message to China by saying, you step out of the line, you're gonna get some as well. I mean, really, it's not rocket science, isn't it? But there's no will in the West to do this.
I think already you've seen on the field that I think the other day a top North Korean general was reportedly killed, and reportedly I don't use that in the in the term we mock most of the time, but just because it's difficult with war to know for certain. But that's certainly the reports coming out from the Ukrainian side on that point. And of course, you know, it doesn't matter to these dictators that their cannon fodder of large numbers of troops are killed. They really couldn't care less. It's in a sense, it's only the generals that count, and even them only count to a certain extent that they can't, when they can't be replaced by the remaining cannon fodder. So it's got implications down the line, perhaps. I think, yeah, certainly your point about red lines and your analysis to Obama is dead on, because this does feel like Putin's barely even painted red lines on the ground before there are red footprints on the far side of it, having already crossed over. So I think what we have to judge him by is his actions, not his words. And there are some actions in there as well, like this hypersonic missile that they fired the other day, because that's a new step. That one, that's the Oreshnik intermediary missile, and what's interesting about that one is its speed and its reach, because that traveled a distance of I think it was 490 miles in 15 minutes, reaching a speed of like Mach 10. And one of the features of that is because it goes so fast, is it manages to avoid some radar detection, and it has a range of over 3,000 miles, which puts it within range of the west coast of America, for example. So I think a lot of the time there's always this focus on the word nuclear and a distraction in the word nuclear, when there are other things that that would likely be used first, and each use of those is a demonstration of what that could be used for on another occasion. Not that it will be, not that they will hit the west coast of America, that's highly unlikely, but they're just pointing out that they could whilst hitting Ukraine. And basically the whole message is to the West, stop supporting Ukraine. That's all Russia is interested in doing right now. So each military move is intended to cut off the support to the Ukrainians and therefore bring the war in Russia's favor to an end via that method. So once you see it through that lens, it's very easy to understand each of Putin's steps, even if they seem like they don't have a total plan to them. They seem haphazard.
We had a few comments that I just want to cover, and then I want to go to my favorite topic when it comes to this aspect. Someone was asking, I'd love to know if there is any serious political opposition to Putin in Russia. So my understanding is basically what Russia is doing is what's called controlled opposition. Is basically sort of like have these opposition parties or have these opposition candidates, but either they are directly agreed upon, have to be agreed upon by Putin, or sort of are in the channel of knowing what you are there for. Basically, for all purposes, Putin is a dictator, and that's the way you should look at it. No matter if they have a random election that they might have, he is pretty much fully in control, at least when it comes to sort of like being at the top, and not basically there is no chance of actually him getting removed sort of democratically. I think we can talk a little bit about some possibilities. Someone was asking what would happen if Russia did nuke Ukraine now under Trump. How would NATO react? My fear is that they would all find an excuse to do nothing, just like with Iran. We must not escalate. So I think specifically with that, well, big part of it is if like an actual nuke was dropped, in a sense that is something we've never seen before when it comes to modern setting. And I really, it's hard to say what will happen because, again, we have no precedents for it. But I'm really, I don't think whatever checks and balances exist in Russia, and by that, it's the only check and balance is Putin afraid of being deposed is pretty much the only way to look at it. And I think while even if he went on completely suicidal, which I think using nuke would be an absolute like writing your own suicide note, I don't think because he still has a lot of oligarchs to sort of appease. And I don't think pretty much anyone would stand by him, even if it meant the only alternative to nuking Ukraine would be completely abandoning Ukraine. I think even then it would probably be preferable for them to completely leave.
I think you're right there, because if he ever decide to use a nuke, one way or the other, that will spell the end of the current regime in Russia. And I bet he doesn't have an appetite for that, nor has all his friend oligarchs, who will realize actually lose their position if that happens. So,
and already there are also, there may be some question marks on how good the crusty old nukes in Russia actually are as well, and you wouldn't want to reveal that either. And I think this point about escalating it's always used on one side, isn't it? I mean, Russia has just escalated by having 10,000 North Korean troops brought in. If that's not an escalation, I don't know what is. But of course, that is often ignored when assessing the picture. It's always, can the West do less? Can the West appease Putin more? Can it step back and allow him the full PR propaganda win of knowing he can do what he wants simply with a PR announcement, which is depressing to say the least, especially when he's been doing things like he threatened a US base in Poland the other day, didn't he? Said it was on a list for potential destruction, and NATO had to scramble some F-16s along the Polish border. So, we're reminding him as an opposition, where possible, but it's got to be done across the board and more convincingly. And I think people need to understand the fact that the threat that he poses, but also the extent to which it's also some hyperbole and bluster as well. So both need balancing.
Yeah, just on the terms of escalation, I think really Keir Starmer escalated by calling Putin irresponsible. I mean, that's warmongering talk. We also had one more asking, doesn't Putin regard all the former Soviet satellites as Russian land? So important thing to remember with dictatorships is all the land is your land. I mean, what basis do you have for recognizing a specific this land is actually of the other country? No, I mean, you don't respect individual rights of your own people by being dictatorship. Why would you have any respect besides not wanting to be beaten in a war? You have no respect. So if Russia can invade Georgia, if Russia can invade Ukraine, if Russia could I don't know, annex Belarus or invade any other country, they would do it. There is literally no reason why that would be problematic for them. Someone brings up, you're not mentioning that Ukraine has canceled elections indefinitely. So something on that specifically, I was actually trying to look up that to understand it. So my understanding right now is that the elections did basically, I'm not sure if cancel would be the right word, or postponed or whatever, but basically it, in a sense, it was lawful. Basically under a national, it was like in a law that under national emergency, it went through parliament. Under national emergency, there is a way to sort of suspend elections. If something like that, I mean, there is a debate about, the legitimacy of such an actions. You have to remember, millions of Ukrainians are currently living under Russian occupation. Do you do elections without them? Do they not get a voice? Do you, and not to mention, 20% of Ukraine is currently occupied. Do you run an election when, you have this? I mean, again, this is not the case of America during World War II that, they had one theater thousands of kilometers away in one direction and another theater thousands of kilometers in the other direction. Ukraine is actively occupied. While whenever election is postponed or canceled, it is scary thing. It is something that is unfortunate, but sort of trying to equate it that basically Russia and Ukraine are the same in the way they view their election is, again, I think ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, to make the point that the normal process of a state is not followed in Ukraine, and ignore the fact that Russia is supporting Syria, is giving intel and probably weapons to the Houthis, is been providing weapons to Hezbollah, is been providing nuclear centrifuges to produce nuclear material to Iran. We ignore this, and we just criticize a state which has been invaded, and because it's not following the correct democratic procedures. I mean, let's look at essentially, this is a country that's trying to defend itself against an invaders. So does it really matter if it's not totally democratic at the moment? They are fighting for their own existence. They're fighting for their own rights. They're not going to need election if they get invaded by Russia. It's going to be a futile exercise in the first place. So to worry about those kind of minutiae at this stage is a bit missing the wood for the trees, isn't it?
I mean, distrust of governments is something that we as objectivists have got plenty of in every situation. But to take this inference that Zelensky is trying to cling on to power for as long as possible whilst his country is being endlessly bombed and is therefore prolonging the war so he doesn't have to hold elections so he can keep the job is a level of cynicism which is simply warmongering for Russia.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think someone in the chat says it is law in Ukraine due to the war. Yeah, as I've said, I think it basically falls under, if you are under martial law, then basically you can sort of postpone it. And they did postpone it a bunch of times because they are, they are still in active war. If this war and let's hope it doesn't happen. But if this war drags on for, I don't know, 3, 4 years in like a similar way, I think maybe you could start having a conversation there, like, now is the time. And from my understanding, if you look at the polls, it looks like Ukrainians are sort of more willing to basically have some sort of peace, even if it means losing land. And I think that's, while it's really disappointing to see, because you really should never surrender to evil, it's not unreasonable to understand. This has been going on for 2.5 years. There has been pretty much no change in a long time, and the West is, I think, very lacking when it comes to the full-on, like full support of Ukraine. So we'll see where it goes from here. Now to sort of the biggest point I wanted to make, and I think it comes back to this like support of Ukraine, and I think some maybe isolationist view. I think it's almost specifically to United States, but you have this in even in European countries, is this sort of, this, it's Ukrainians' war. It doesn't concern us. We should focus on things at home. We shouldn't really, send money to Ukraine when we can have like money here. Um, so just quickly on that one, it's amazing to everybody becomes fiscal conservative as soon as it comes to supporting Ukraine, but not in almost any other scenario. But also there are few things that government not only is doing, but that should be doing. National security is one of the reasons the government absolutely should be doing, and in a sense, there is no price tag you could put on it. It's something government must do. And trying to look at Russia and as saying, let's say, as American, and sort of saying this is not our war, when Russia is helping the Houthis bomb the international shipping, is fighting American allies in Syria, is actively, helping more and more with Iran, which Iran is directly supporting. For example, the Houthis or different militias or terrorist groups that are attacking United States. Sorry, Iran would never attack United Nations. The general Russian sort of hybrid warfare, actively interfering in pretty much any election in the West, killing people in the West. I mean, Russia has actually killed some people in the UK, for example. I mean, you could go on, and trying to hide behind it as like they are not, Putin has not directly shot an American citizen or something like that, and viewing it as we are not actually, or America is not actually in the conflict, I think is very misguided view of what's going on actually. Marco?
Yeah, I mean, Russia has been actively aggressive towards a number of nations. I mean, here, as you mentioned, they used a nerve agent, a chemical weapon, to try and kill an opponent, and in the process, they killed a civilian. They did the same thing in Germany. What happened? Nothing. This was in 2017, I think, way after Crimea. So at that point, you knew exactly what Putin's point was. And to let him get away with it, it's just farcical, really. Yeah, and let's not forget that the reason why Ukraine has been invaded because it doesn't have nuclear arsenal, which they used to have when the USSR was broken down. They were convinced by, I think, in the 90s by Clinton, presumably, um, to give up their arsenal in order to make the world a better place, without nukes and this kind of stuff. And in exchange, they were promised protection from Russia were they to do something stupid. Now Russia has done something stupid, has done something evil, and it's our duty now to stand up to what we promised to Ukraine. That's fine. Ukraine is not the most trustworthy and clean country. They are ridden with all sorts of um, um, corruption and stuff like that. But that doesn't justify being invaded by somebody like Russia. Despite that, we should stand up for a promise we make. Otherwise, what kind of self-interest are we going to serve if we lie to our future allies? They will not have a leg to stand on. They will not believe us. Therefore, all our effort to try and make alliances and bolster our security is going to fall flat. So to argue that we shouldn't help them at the stage is just frankly cynical and short-sighted.
Yeah, and just to sort of like offer basically more of a like a pragmatic thing, is also a lot of like support for Ukraine meant pretty much just sending the old stuff we were not going to use anyway. And in some cases, I think Slovakia actually made money on that because there was like a EU, basically like a fund created to sort of like cover that. And yeah, a lot of stuff. It was just like old equipment to basically, to basically just give support. So again, some people view it as we are just sending like helicopter money to random like Ukrainian civilians.
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be more than just empty words, doesn't it? It's not just a case of changing your corporate logo or your personal Facebook logo to "I heart Ukraine" and leaving it at that, is it? It's got to be actual support for them for it to mean anything at all. And of course, in the same way that people cover up their anti-Semitism by calling it anti-Zionism, people use the badge of "I don't like government spending" temporarily to cover up the fact that they simply are quite happy for Russia to walk all over any parts of Eastern Europe, and beyond, no doubt. But at this point, Ukraine. So yeah, I think that's all in it. And also, I think what the bigger lessons from this are things like the nuclear capability of these dictators. And if this is not a warning as to how much things would change if Iran reached nuclear capability, because everything is predicated on the fact that Russia does have nuclear weapons, and therefore a lot of the reaction to everything that's going on is defined by that fact. And the reactions to it are more measured, sometimes too measured, because of that potential threat. And you translate that across to Iran, and you have a short window to stop it. And if you don't do so now, this same period we're talking about, this same period of the next few months, and of course into early on within the Trump presidency, if you don't allow Israel to, with US support, physically prevent, not through diplomacy, not through visiting with clipboards, but physically prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons, then you will rue that forever when they are in this boat that Russia is currently in.
Yeah, and so I think one of the most important point to remember when it comes to Ukraine, and it's a point I've heard, I think, originally from Ryan Macbeth, who does a pretty good, mostly like intelligence analysis of this conflict, is that Ukraine war is not about Ukraine, it's about Taiwan. And basically him saying that when it comes to this, China is looking very closely about the response to Ukraine. It's important to remember that, if Ukraine were to fall or something like that, if the guarantee, yeah, as you said, Marco, the guarantees we give to Ukraine pretty much don't mean anything. Well, how much do NATO guarantees? How much are the Baltic countries? Are they going to be protected when if Russia were to do something? What about Georgia? That's not a NATO country at all. What about any other? And then what about, and just going back to North Korea, what about South Korea? What about Japan? North Korea is already sort of posturing towards both of these, basically saying, we can just shoot rockets into your waters and then no one's gonna do anything about it. And if we if really we're gonna give up on Ukraine, I think something Ryan Macbeth says that we have a direct railway connection from Poland to Ukraine that we can easily supply. How much are we gonna supply Taiwan? That's thousands of kilometers, like divided by a giant ocean. I mean, again, not to mention, I mean, you could go into the whole case of the fact that I think Taiwan is producing most of the like world supply of semiconductors, and like disrupting that supply chain can have catastrophic aspects. Not to even mention, just allowing countries to, randomly invade other countries and not doing anything about it, just doing that. Is, I think, really like that's what scares me the most. That basically, if the West sort of gives up on Ukraine, what reason do these dictatorships have to ever fear attacking different nations? Marco?
Yeah, totally right. And China is a big problem, isn't it? Because China is been flexing its muscle in the South China Seas, disrupting, even I think getting into territorial water of Japan. They've been taking actions that a few years ago would have been unthinkable. They've done stuff that, you know, it would be considered an act of war, but they get away with it. And of course, they probably don't believe their luck from 2020, where they were able to invade and take over Hong Kong without no one saying anything from the West. That's just, I mean, that's an act. They went totally unpunished. The other day, again, our clown from number 10 met with Xi Jinping and called for a normalization of ties and collaboration, those kind of stuff. It's like, you people are either deranged or you're really out of your depth. I think that it's a mix of corruption and stupidity, frankly. But going back to Russia, Russia is a dictatorship. Its economy is faltering. It's based on a culture which is fairly mystical, not particularly sophisticated. They are really struggling to stand up to Ukraine. Do you really think they would be able to stand up to the West if the West decided to make Putin rude the moment he decided to invade Ukraine? They wouldn't stand up. Probably they would collapse by itself anyway. I mean, we know just look at USSR. It collapsed because it was a dictatorship based on, principles of deny individual rights. Putin is doing the same, and his doom is the same. He's gonna fall apart. Dictatorships like those cannot possibly stand. They are, a fact against reality. They might last 5, 50, 70 years, but beyond that, they're doomed to fail. And I think Putin is realizing this. He's realizing that he cannot keep it together, and that's why he's roaring, making lots of noise. But frankly, I think we should call his bluff. I think we should just pound these people at the time where they seem to be the weakest, including Iran and all his proxies.
And the lesson should go out there. The principle, the example to all the dictators and bullies is that force should fail, and being the initiating aggressor should fail, as opposed to each dictator, as you say, learning from what the other gets away with and translating it to their own grievances, turf, or a desire to acquire land, territory, or force on over more people. As you mentioned, all the stuff about what China does quietly and steadily, including some of the sand dredging to create little island bases out in the middle of the sea for a staging post for a future invasion of whether it's Taiwan or further beyond that, and would just sit by watching. That feels so similar to watching the troops gather on the border of Ukraine 2.5 years ago and saying, oh, it's just a military exercise, it's not really going to cross the border, when all of the evidence points the other way, and you could have been doing something to prevent getting to the point we're now at. So, these are the consequences of hiding from those causes. And right now, we need to keep that focus in mind.
Yeah, and something that always sort of surprises me. I'm still young, but and I keep learning about the philosophy of Ayn Rand, objectivism, and oftentimes you have the answers, or you have the principles, such as the dictatorships are by themselves impractical, like are useless, and uh, I you sort of understand the theory, you sort of understand the principle, yet when you see it in reality, it still sort of surprises you. I mean, it's almost laughable how useless Russian army is. I mean, again, just if you look at the differences between two of them, how Israel destroyed both Hezbollah and pretty much all Iranian missile capabilities. I mean, it still surprises you when those things are true. Uh, if you live by force, such as the dictatorships, you are rejecting reason, you are rejecting mind, and you will learn it. Anything you guys like to say?
No, not especially, but we're a little older than you, but we're still learning the philosophy of Ayn Rand and objectivism, and it only helps make everything clearer, whether in your own personal life or when looking at geopolitics like this. So obviously, one of the reasons for this channel is for encourage everybody to read Ayn Rand wherever possible. And I think we ought to mention the Briefly Objective, which I think is coming up with a premiere in a moment with Lee Pearson. And for all the clips on there, you can see the details below in the description.
So link for that is in the chat. It's gonna premiere in just about a few seconds, I believe. So let us say bye, I guess. Thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you everybody for watching. We'll see you on the Briefly Objective in just a bit, and also tomorrow with another episode of the Daily Objective. Until then, bye bye.